Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Millie's Baseside Chats, where we are live streaming to bring some calm to the chaos of your PCS. Join us every week on Wednesdays, where we bring in subject matter experts, PCS pros, and duty station experts to give you all of the dish about an upcoming PCS that you might be looking at, some information about duty stations, or challenging topics that you or issues that you might be facing. So today I am super excited to be talking about a facet of military life that can sometimes throw some wrenches in plans, and I want to help you navigate a seemingly complex system, and I have brought you one of my favorite people. Susan Reynolds is joining us today, and she's going to be chatting and answering questions all about the Exceptional Family Member Program, otherwise known as EFMP. We will probably only refer to it as such for the remainder of the broadcast. But I want to encourage you guys to throw your questions in the comments. If you're catching us on replay or maybe midway through the conversation, feel free to go ahead and ask your questions. We will continue to monitor the comments after the live broadcast has concluded. So feel free and welcomed and included in the conversation as questions arise for you. Or if you have resources to throw in, please go ahead and do so. Okay. So I want to introduce you guys to my friend Susan.
What's up?
Hang on, let me get her on screen. There we go. There's Susan. Hey, girl.
What's up? How are you?
I'm
okay,
awesome.
Is this better? I feel like this is a better sound all of a sudden.
It's good. I think
Okay.
we're good. Yeah. So Susan is joining us. You're in Virginia, yeah?
I'm in Virginia now. Yeah. It's for lovers.
Susan and I used to be like neighbors here in Fayetteville, Fort Bragg, even though she's Air Force spouse.
God, we were there forever too, weren't we? We were like the longest Air Force family there, I swear, after a while, like
even
7
after closed down.
years.
You're like, no, we're staying.
Well, it's when your husband does a job that the Army doesn't have, that's what happens. So you have to hang out with both Army and Air Force installations.
So Susan, take a quick second and introduce yourself. I would love for everyone to get to know your experience with the military, because it is vast and reaches far back, right? So give us a brief little intro of who is Susan Reynolds.
So I wasn't technically born on Fort Lee, but my dad was stationed at Fort Lee because they never had a hospital where you could have babies at Fort Lee. So I was born in Richmond. We moved to Germany when I was little. We lived in Leavenworth, and boy, that was a really fun assignment because there was it was like, super weird and like really cool people lived there then. We actually had like this Saudi Arabian sheik's son in our cul-de-sac in Leavenworth housing who used to fly in like Maine lobsters on his private jet, like for parties. Yeah, it was really crazy. It was, a long time ago where, people were all like, it was really crazy. We moved around a lot as a kid. I think by the time I was 8 years old, I had moved like 5 times.
Wow.
We had moved that much, right? And we were, typical Army life. It was a really different time because it was the 80s in Europe, and the terrorism threat level was different from how it is now, but very similar to how it is now. So everything was always on high alert, yet we were always trying to do really amazing things with our former West German partners. Yeah. But what was really cool is I was actually in early high school when the Berlin Wall came down.
Wow. So
I got to see that.
And you were there.
Like I got to see,
incredible.
And then I got to be there when Germany reunified.
Wow.
So, that's the really cool part about being a military kid is you actually get to sit there and really, you get to watch history unfold in front of you.
That's so awesome.
So,
and I love talking to you and getting your perspective on things. Like even just like, I love your stories about growing up in base housing overseas specifically.
Much fun.
I don't know. As a parent, like I didn't have exposure to the military as a child. So as a parent, I'm always wondering like, are my kids okay? Like, are we doing the right thing for them? Is this the best experience? And I love talking to you about your experiences growing up and how like cherished they are for you.
Gosh, yeah. It's such a different world, though, too, because my experiences growing up as a military kid are completely different from my son's, right? Like, yeah, Vietnam was over by the time I was a kid, right? Like, we were not this nation at war like we are now, right?
Yeah.
went on TDYs, he went exercises and training, but it wasn't this heavy deployment cycle like we have now, right? Like, so now my son looks at the military as this entity that takes away mommies and daddies, right?
Yeah.
And that makes me so sad for him because I grew up, you know, running around in housing, and we came in when the streetlights come on, right? But in Germany, and the streetlights come on at 10 o'clock at night. So, you know, that, you know, I remember the base general was, his kids would come out and they would come and play with us, right? And, you know, we would all go over to his house and he would come and get into a water gun fight with us, right? Or like, if we rode our bikes by his house and he happened to be out washing his car, you better watch out because he's going to hold you down. And I mean, and he's going to run around playing with the rest of us, right? Like, all of the kids were always encouraged to come to his house and play.
So fun. That's so awesome. Okay, so let's transition to talking about your kids' experience. So let's maybe, as much as you're comfortable with, maybe share a little bit about how you became familiar with the EFMP program through personal experience, and then we'll move on. I have some more questions from there, but like, just generally, what is it and how did you come to find it?
So I should have been, it's really interesting, I should have been enrolled in EFMP as a kid.
Oh, wow.
I had childhood asthma, and I have ADHD and dyslexia, right? So I should have been enrolled as a kid, but the program was only getting rolled out. And you know how we like to do things in DOD, pilot programs for years, right?
Yeah.
So the Army, though, was the first branch to start the program. And you know, it always kills me when I hear people say that Army family support isn't great, because I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, are you kidding? Back in 1983, the U.S. Army was like, this isn't good. We have people who have kids or spouses that are ill or have a disability, and they can't get access to health care. That's bad. We should fix it. How is that not family support, right? Like,
we're just crabby because we get really sad duty stations sometimes in not so great areas. That's the only thing. That's our beef with everybody else.
You know, I could also say that Cannon Air Force Base in New Mexico is maybe not, you know, a stellar. Yeah. Not a place I have any desire to go to, right? Like, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm sure it's lovely, but I don't want to be there. But, you know, so I should have been, with like childhood asthma, I should have been enrolled, but my dad retired in 87, right? So, you know, and we stayed overseas. My mom was a DOD teacher, and he ended up working for DOD as well. So, you know, it never mattered at that point, right? But I then became refamiliarized, like I got reacquainted with the program when we were stationed in Nebraska, actually, because I had a partial thyroidectomy. And I asked my doctor, I was like, dude, you took out body part that helps regulate all the hormones in my body. Should I like be enrolled in EFMP? And I'll never forget the doc saying, no, that's a children's program. It's just for children.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
And I was like, are you sure about that? And he goes, yes. Why would you question me?
Of course.
And I said, you know, and I said, well, because I don't think it is just a children's program. What if a spouse has breast cancer?
Right.
Are you guys going to send the family to a place where they can't get access to, you know, the right kind of care?
Right.
Or they're having to drive 150 miles to get the care? I said, so don't we protect families with this too, like spouses, you know, adults? He's like, no, it's a children's program, and you really shouldn't question me. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I just kind of sat there and I thought, well, I think he's wrong, but, you know, you're starting to get a little threatened here and a little combative, so I'm just going to back off, dude, because, yeah. But then I got I got reacquainted with the program when we got to Bragg, and I started hearing about discrepancies between how the Army implements EFMP and how the Air Force implements EFMP, right? Here we are at Fort Bragg, and there's 50,000 active duty service members and their families, and you have this massive hospital that has all sorts of specialty care, right? And I mean, it's amazing to see how big Womack is. I mean, you still can't ever find parking, but
it's true.
so many docs there, specialty docs. Like, did you know I don't know if they still do, but they used to have a pediatric endocrinologist there, right?
Wow. Yeah.
You have a kid with type 1 diabetes, you're now not having to drive to Durham.
Right.
Because the doctor's
90
there.
minutes away, guys, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, there's the doctor right there at Womack. How awesome is that, right? Yeah. So, but the Army really looks at EFMP as very much of while it's an assignments program, they also view it as more of a family support side too. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that the Army family support in EFMP is hands down the best I've ever seen, right? Like, just, it's amazing to me, right? I don't understand what they're doing. I can't figure it out. I don't feel like these are big secrets here in like life, but I got to sit back and observe for 8 years, right, to see what the Army was doing, and they always had something going on.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Advocacy classes, how to work and get an IEP for your child, what are early childhood intervention services, all of it. Like, they had it all. And, oh, wait, sorry, I'm thinking somebody's going to try to make a crossing here, and he's a little orange cat. Sorry.
Oh, it's fine. Cameos by kitties. It's fine.
So no, I actually got him pushed away. But that's what I saw that Bragg was doing that I was so impressed with. And I had longed to see that happening on our side, of the Air Force side. And it never really took off. And I always struggled with that. So, but I got my first full introduction with my son, actually. Ian was denied a cranial reshaping helmet. I actually was told when we still had TRICARE offices in Womack, right before they all closed down, I was actually told by the TRICARE person that I should enroll in EFMP to, quote unquote, score a free helmet.
Oh.
Because that's not taking advantage of the system. Okay. And then we started to get into all of his ear issues and everything like that, and chronic ear infections. And let me tell you something. Right now, we're trying to find a pediatric ENT that takes the Johns Hopkins plan up here in Northern Virginia, and I can't find one.
Wow.
There's a reason. There's a reason why you need to be enrolled, even for things like ENT, right? Yeah. Because you need to make sure they're taking our insurance.
Right.
So, yeah. But I actually like the program. People think I don't like it, but I do.
Well, we're often critical of the things that we love because we want them to remain, at a certain level and then also improve. So, as long as we're doing so, I think, the work that you do is important. So tell us in a nutshell, if anyone's listening and isn't familiar with EFMP, what is it?
So EFMP stands for Exceptional Family Member Program. Yay! Your family member is required to enroll. Right? This is not a choice program. This is a mandatory program. If you, the service member, know that your family needs to be enrolled in this program and you make the choice not to enroll them, your career is on the line. Like, there's actions. There will be actions taken against you. The Air Force has really been cracking down on this one, actually. For real. Like, they're not messing around, because this impacts the service member's ability to get an assignment.
Sure.
Right. And that's also the other big part of EFMP. So it's a 3-pronged approach: assignments, medical, and family support. Assignments being number 1, because it is in the eyes of almost every department, pretty much every department, that is the most important component. I have a little beef with that. I think it should be more of a family support program, because when you look at the family support side, the assignment always falls in place, right?
Right.
So, that's always been like my big, let's tweak our thinking a little bit. But, I'm not in charge of the program, so, it's not like, what can I do? I can keep on talking about it, right? So the assignment component is very important, because in that paperwork that's filled out, and that is a standardized paperwork now across the branches, outlines what the medical diagnoses are for the family members, right? So we're talking childhood asthma or even adult. So asthma, autism is a massive diagnosis that we see in EFMP, learning disabilities, cancer, muscular dystrophy, paralysis, multiple sclerosis. Chronic migraines, believe it or not, qualifies EFMP, because if you need to see a neurologist, guess what? A neurologist isn't everywhere. Right? Chronic pain issues. That's another big one, right? You need to see pain management. We have pain management at some military treatment facilities, but guess what? They only see active duty.
Right. Yeah.
So you have to remember those things. Again, we brought up type 1 diabetes, childhood diagnosis with diabetes. You can't have a family stationed at Fort Irwin, for example, and the closest facility is 2+ hours away, and you won't get there in times of crisis fast enough. So EFMP is meant to be a program that, yes, does prohibit a service member from taking an assignment, but it's prohibitive in a positive way, because why would you want your family to be at a place where they can't get medical care?
Right.
Like, makes no sense. Yeah, that makes no sense. Like, that's an option, right? Like, people would choose not to enroll and put their families through that stress. Like, I think that's the most terrible thing to do to the person you claim to love, right? Like, hey,
I know.
You know.
So I think that's a great point.
It's super judgmental when I say it like that, and I apologize to people who are hearing that. But that's how, you know what? Those are my thoughts on that one. Like, you love family, so you do right by them. Right? You enroll in EFMP.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. So that's a great point. So what are some of the myths around the EFMP program? Like, so let's try to dispel some of that.
So it's a career killer is a big one.
Okay.
Right? I will never forget when I was at the Air Force Association's Air and Space Conference a few years ago, and I was talking to this very nice man in the combat control community, and he said, well, you know why you guys are still stuck at Bragg? And I was like, no, I have no idea. He's like, because you're enrolled in EFMP. You need to get out. So then that way you can take any assignment. And I said, I don't want to go to an assignment where my son can't get medical care.
Yeah.
Or I can't get medical care. I don't, and my husband doesn't want that. And he goes, well, his career is done then. I said, well, no, I vehemently disagree with you. I can't even respectfully disagree with you, sir. I vehemently disagree with you.
Yeah.
I said, if the Air Force is going to punish him for taking care of his family, I said, then you know what? Then that's on the Air Force.
Right.
That's the Air Force's fault. Right. And he was not happy with me, but I didn't care, because to me, again, that is not the right thing to say to someone. Family member is in need, so don't sit there and say it's a career killer. No, the job of the Air Force and the job of our personnelists, the job of our assignments people, and this includes like everybody in the chain of command, is to ensure that airman or soldier or sailor marine's career is not impacted in a negative way, because they chose to ensure their family's health and well-being.
Right.
You can't say on one hand, your family needs to be taken care of so you can deploy all the time, soldier, and then hinder the soldier for taking care of their family.
Totally.
By playing an EFMP, right? Like, that hypocrisy doesn't fly with me.
Yeah.
So,
and I think with so many things, I feel like, especially in the military culture, there are just these stigmas everywhere about all kinds of things that everyone feels. And and there might be some units, some commands that this actually does happen, and that needs to be like flushed out, truthfully. But
yes.
Yeah, but you gotta put your family first, for sure.
Yeah. The other big one is that people will enroll in EFMP to get sweet assignments, right? Like, so you have a kid that is, so with our son, with his, he's an anxiety disorder, right? And so we have very limited places where we can go because of his anxiety disorder, because it's so hard to find a mental health professional who will see a child his age.
Right.
So we are limited to about 10 to 15 duty stations.
Okay.
And they have to be larger metropolitan areas.
And they're probably big cities with,
Or big bases, too, where the community has come and grown in support around the installation, right? So, like, believe it or not, Bragg is one of those communities.
Oh, I believe it. Totally, yeah.
Fort Campbell is another one of those communities where the surrounding communities, the surrounding towns have grown and are meeting the needs of Fort Campbell, right? And that's amazing. Like, thank you. Clarksville, Tennessee, for being so thoughtful, right? So, I mean, that's a nice thing to do, right? So, and then you also look at what's going on in those installations too. So the reason why you're going to have access to care in certain places, like especially I thought mental health care was quite accessible at Bragg, is because it is a heavy deployment duty station. Yeah. They are going to have a plethora of mental health professionals everywhere because we need to keep our families strong.
Yeah, it's true. And it's supply and demand, right? Like the more people that are accessing the programming and saying, hey, I would like to receive these services or I need these services, the more service providers theoretically will be there to fill in all of the gaps. So if we're avoiding, labeling ourselves or, or whatever the fear of that is, then it's just going to go completely unnoticed and understood.
Exactly. And a lot of people thought that coming like up here to the National Capital Region, we would find, mental health care easily. Mm-hmm. And that has actually been my opposite experience. Really? A lot of mental health professionals up here don't accept insurance at all. Like they just in general do not accept insurance. Right. And you have to reconcile with your insurance afterwards. And I'm like, dude, husband's enlisted. Can we just take I can't afford $185 every time in hopes that TRICARE will actually pay me back my $185. Because guess what? That's not happening.
Right. Yeah, totally. So talk to me about, let's say, you know what? Actually, I have one more. I feel like a lot of people that I talk to feel or think that EFMP is a lifelong or career-long opt-in. And that's not necessarily the case, right? You could, it's not easy, so to speak, but you can come and go from the program if it's a temporary need.
So like a high-risk pregnancy is a really great example. Like you're not going to be high-risk pregnant after you've had the baby, right? Like baby's been born, right? Like you're not 10 years later still be EFMP enrolled for a high-risk pregnancy 10 years later, right?
Yeah. My daughter actually had a skin condition that she was born with, and we had it treated, and we wanted to stay put so that she could continue to see the same, providers. She had a whole team of people working on her situation.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then it was a 2-year thing. And then we de-enrolled. We got out because we didn't need the services anymore. And we're, could pretty much find a dermatologist just about anywhere. So that wasn't like as highly specific as her original diagnosis needed. So yeah, we were in the program for 2 years or so. And then actually we know we needed to PCS and we wanted to ease that process a little bit. So we just de-enrolled before we left. So just to eliminate some of those hurdles. So let's talk about that. So if you're, yeah. So what does that process look like? So you're in EFMP. You have 2 family members in EFMP. So how does that affect your move situation?
So we're always going to be more permanent EFMP people, right? Because my son has now they don't consider a 504 in the school, although I disagree with that because it is educational accommodations because of his ADHD. Sure. So he has ADHD as well. So do I. So we'll always stay permanently registered because we're always going to seek treatment for our ADHD. Mm-hmm. I've had a number of healthcare issues because, getting old sucks. So, there you go. So I'm going to be one of the more permanent people enrolled in EFMP. But let's say it was just something like speech therapy, and my son only needed speech therapy because that happens with some kids, right? You would have the speech therapy. He would be cleared from speech therapy. You would go into your installation EFMP office and start disenrolling. Now, it can be tricky. Like that's the downfall, is that it can be difficult for some people. I will never forget, I met this general one time, the nicest man I've ever met, gives the best hug on the planet, right? Like not better than my child.
That's the quality. That's where Susan's threshold is. Like, how good of a hugger are you?
Great hugger, we're going to be friends for life. And he and I were sitting down talking one day, and he was like, young lady, it took me, and he said X amount of years, I think it was like 6 or 7 years to disenroll from EFMP. His son was no longer an ID card holder, right? Like, not even enrolled in DEERS anymore, technically not his dependent. Wow. And he could not, he had to file an IG, inquiry into disenrolling. So it can be really tricky at times. It's very strange how some people it's very easy and some people it's not. And you're like, thanks. Wow. I know when mental health is involved, though, even if you are no longer seeking mental health services, your family will stay enrolled for quite some time afterwards. It's because we're taking mental health that seriously now.
Good. Yeah, I think that's...
Yeah. You know, we should be. Like, that's the thing. We see that our suicide rates are rising. Yeah. So, you know, you want to make sure you have access to quality mental health care. You know?
Totally. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So you mentioned some resources earlier. What are some of the the go-to places besides obviously the EFMP website? And I'll actually look those up and type them in the comments here. But tell me some of your favorite resources and places to go for information.
So I am, first of all, I love to get information in person because, or at least on the phone. Like, I am not the biggest crowdsourcer in Facebook groups. Everybody has their own spin.
It gets tricky. Yeah.
I am the biggest fan of Google, right? Like, Google that stuff and get the policy. So that's what I do. The Air Force has put together a phenomenal Air Force-wide EFMP site. Same thing with the Army, the Navy, and the Marines. Coast Guard calls it Office of Special Needs. Okay. That is the best place to go for information. If you want to look up policies, you go straight to the source. Go to your branch's website. Not just at Fort Bragg or Fort Carson or, Langley Air Force Base. Go to the, .army websites, right? The other place that I had long forgotten about, but I was thankfully reminded of again recently, was actually Military OneSource. Mm-hmm. And they have been really updating their EFMP information. And the thing that I like the most about Military OneSource is it's digestible and it's understandable. And they hyperlink everything. It's amazing. It's amazing. So if you want to know what the policies are, go to Military OneSource and you will find the policies there too. Right. The other thing that they have there is the EFMP ROC program, which stands for Resources, Options, and Consultations. That's free. You can call someone up or do a live chat and they will help you find out EFMP information for real.
I have never heard right? That. That's so cool.
TRICARE liaison.
ROC, I see it. Okay. Oh, that's
They even have a TRICARE liaison, and it's all free. And I'm like, holy bananas. Where was this 10 years ago, right?
That's the problem with getting older. It's like, we're like all this new stuff comes out. We're like, come on, man. Okay, so we're dropping all these links. Hey, Lena. Connection really bad at MTF. We'll replay later. Okay, Lena. Yeah, you're huge. Lena is a huge advocate for EFMP, especially in the Esposos Hispanic space. So, Lena, please jump in and throw your comments when you have a better connection.
That's an area that needs a lot of work, believe it or not, because we see, and this is I'm going to talk about my disability advocacy right here, for a couple minutes. We see that especially the Hispanic community or non-English-speaking communities are actually facing higher rates of referrals for special education services, where the problem, or I wouldn't say problem, but where the issue could be is just a language barrier.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But that's not, true inclusion means working with these families and not penalizing them for not being English speakers right away.
Yeah.
Not everybody comes to America speaking English right away. Heck, when France was when England was invaded in 1066, guess what? They spoke French in the English court for, 3 centuries? So really?
Susan. But it's true.
Come on.
It's a great point.
I'm not trying to be mean when I say it like that, but for real, they spoke French for 3 or 4 centuries, okay? In the English court.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So thank you, Lena, for everything that you do. In that space. We've got Allison watching. Hey, Allison, Jess, Ken. Hey, what's up? Alina. Hi. Thanks for joining us. You guys, if anybody has questions, comments, anything like that, go ahead and chime in. We'd love to hear your thoughts on all things EFMP.
I do have to say, despite all the negativity surrounding the program, because there is a lot of it and a lot of, and that makes me sad, right?
Right.
It really makes me sad. I think that this is a really good program. I really do. How thoughtful, if you really stop and think about it that way, how thoughtful of the U.S. Army back in 1983, a post-Vietnam Army, right, that was still licking their wounds from being in Vietnam for so long, that they stopped and recognized the sacrifices of families and said, you know what, we need to make sure that their health care is also a priority.
Yeah.
That child's education is a priority. That, do we have a long way to go still? You bet. But look at where we were,
right?
Right. My second grade teacher actually died from an asthma attack. Had she been enrolled in the EFMP program, she wouldn't have been at our installation.
Wow. Yeah.
People, I hate to sound so dramatic, but people died waiting for the program to be implemented because they didn't have access to care. So instead of sitting here and complaining about it all the time, let's recognize that we have come a very long way, that we have done amazing things. Do we still have a lot of work to do? You bet. Sure. You bet.
Yeah, always.
Always. That's why it's a work in progress. Nothing's ever going to be perfect, and I'm okay with that. I don't want perfection. I just want something that's family friendly.
Yeah.
And as we are getting closer and closer to retirement, I'm looking at wondering what our life is going to be like post Department of Defense world, right? Because we'll be a military family. We won't be an EFMP family anymore. It's an active duty program. And that's going to be, I've spent the better part of 10 years advocating for this program and advocating for the equality and recognition and the inclusion of EFMP in the conversation, in all of the conversation. I'm talking from employment to housing to education. My son is enrolled in EFMP. I want a job too, right? Yeah. So that means I have to have very frank conversations with employers when I'm being interviewed that once a week I have to leave early because.
Yeah. Yep.
That's, so we have to continue to remember the EFMP family member in the conversations, all of them, because right now, if we're not, it just looks bad. It just does. And it looks very exclusive. And I'm so sick of that. Oh, here it comes.
Oh, there's the key. Okay, so Alina has a question, and Alina's joining us a little later in the broadcast. So let's touch back on this though. She says, I feel like we're limited if we're EFMP. Is the military trying to have the program at more bases? So Susan, can you speak to that?
So it's at every base.
Yeah.
EFMP is at every single installation. What limits a person is the diagnosis, right? So you're not going to send a family to a certain duty station based on the diagnosis, right? Personally, I think that there
aren't providers there
to serve the medical care. Yeah. It's quite simply put, the medical care is not there, right? But the unfortunate with that, the flip side of that, is that then we saturate certain duty stations too. So San Antonio is a heavily populated EFMP community. National Capital Region is a heavily populated EFMP community. Langley, Eustis is another one. Fort Bragg is another one. Joint Base Lewis McChord. Fort Carson. So you have some of these installations that have a heavy EFMP population. And again, it goes back to what you and I said earlier, that it's what's there. Right. So you have that the big city is surrounding you or in proximity where you can get access to specialty care. But every single installation has an EFMP office. Now, you can be advised, your family can be denied travel, right? It doesn't mean that the orders are necessarily canceled. You can still go there against the wishes of what the military is saying. Right?
Interesting.
That's, though. That's all on you as a family.
Yeah,
if that's what you have to sit down and say, I'm willing to take that risk.
Yeah. So she had a follow-up comment, said, we really like being overseas, and I feel like we're limited if we're EFMP. Same.
Now, overseas locations are going to be different because it's not necessarily that the medical isn't there. It might be more the educational component because the DoD schools may not be able to provide the educational services. So, and they also take into account language barriers and TRICARE and wait times so if you're in Germany, it's going to be Launchstool.
Yeah. And again, you guys, be really realistic.
Appointment. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous to me. A year-long wait. Not in 2019, you know?
So I think the conversation that I'm hearing and what I want to take away with is not so much like EFMP is limiting, right? We want to, I think, encourage people to be really holistic in evaluating your family's needs and your family's longevity and ability to be able to continue to provide and pour into this lifestyle, and your service member to continue to be able to do their job. Instead of feeling like their jobs are now being pigeonholed, you need to be able to understand and like assess your family's needs and then go seek the treatment, seek the diagnosis if needed. Please, gosh, you know, like don't deny your family services or diagnoses because you're frightened. Because if you think about that long term, it's not sustainable. You're going to put yourself in a position, maybe you do go overseas and you have a horrible experience because you've had some sort of crisis or emergency or medical need or personal need that needs to be accommodated for and can't be. So instead of it being like a mandated thing that the military is telling you can't, there's good reason for it. So yeah. And Kristen Smith says, hey, she says we're two of her favorite people. Yeah.
I do. I love her.
Yeah.
We'll be back soon for Thanksgiving, and my goal is to see you if you're there. And finally meet Kristen in person and just, hug her a whole bunch.
Perfect. And it looks like you have a road trip to Fort Benning planned now. Lena wants to meet up with you as well. So.
Just once, and I love her too. She's amazing.
Yeah. Okay, Susan, as we start to wrap up, again, you guys, if anybody has any questions, comments, resources that you want to throw into the conversation, please do. We'd love to keep all of this kind of in one place as a resource in and of itself that people could come to and find direction. But Susan, do you have any parting words or anything you'd like to add?
So you asked about resources. One of the other big things that we're going to start hearing a lot of chatter about will be special education.
Okay.
And because IEPs are considered part of the EFMP process, you're going to hear a lot of that. Every single state, because this is mandated by federal law, has a free parent resource center on special education in that state. Every single state. Go to Parent Center or Parent Hub. I might have to look it up for you, but it's like parenthub.org, I think, Kelly. And if you will see like the drop down menu of all the states, and you will be able to find each state's parent hub or parent resource center. It's the most amazing thing, and it's free. Awesome. It's amazing.
I think
so yay.
Yep, parenthub.org.
Well, my picture froze, and I'm making a stupid face.
No.
Great.
Oh. Okay. You're good. I can hear you.
Okay. I can really whoa, sad, Susan. That's a dumb face you're making.
So I posted the other day about Facebook not being allowed to choose my thumbnail anymore because it always does a bad picture. All right. I'm going to take you down until you get your feedback, but we can still hear you. So any last... So a parenthub.org/IEP is what I've dropped. So that's an awesome resource.
It's a great resource. Ask questions. People need to remember to ask questions, but ask not in the heat of anger or frustration. Before going into any EFMP office or making any phone call to an EFMP office, sit down and write out questions that you need answers to. If you're not satisfied with the answers, ask for policy. If people seriously start getting uppity and a little on the threatening side about asking for policy, that's none of their business. Remind them that. You have the right to ask for policies. You have the right to want to know what's going on. This is your family. It's okay to ask questions. Don't just blindly or, just don't sit there and say, okay, well, Okay. And if you think something's hinky, ask a question. It's okay. How else are you going to learn?
Totally. Yep. Yeah, you have to advocate for your family. You have to advocate for yourself. I mean, no one else is going to speak up for your kids but you. So definitely do that.
Yeah.
Great. Oh, I hate you're still frozen.
I know. And
this is
so
stupid.
stupid.
I'm like looking. It's like a podcast. You guys tune in. Okay. Well, sorry, Sabine. I want to pull you back on to just have a.
Okay.
But we'll edit this later, and I'll put like your photo on the screen. Susan, thank you so much for joining me today. We had a lot of awesome people tuning in and watching, and I know that you were able to shine a light on some of these issues and debunk some of the myths, and hopefully encourage people to embrace the program and all of the good things that it has to offer. So, yeah, tell everyone, where can we find you? Are you still active in the advocacy space? Like, where can people connect with you if curious?
Well, so it's funny. I've taken down most of my social media, so they'd actually have to just find me on Facebook at Susan Reynolds, and I think I'm like doing like the rock and roll sign in a green shirt or something. So,
I love it.
Yeah,
it's perfect.
Yeah, so I'm not doing my podcast right now because I don't know. I just don't feel like it. Yeah. I just don't. I'm tired, and yeah. So yeah, I'm going to be starting work soon. So ish, I think. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. I don't know.
Awesome. Listen, you guys, I'm connected with Susan, so I can find out stuff for you. And we will continue to pour resources again into these comment threads. If you have needs, specific questions that we don't have the answer to, we will find you someone that does. So just, pay attention, ask your questions, and remember to speak up for your babies and yourself. It's important. Thank you, Susan. I really appreciate your time and for joining us today. This has been awesome.
I know, it's fun. We have to do this again.
I know. Let's do it. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and attention. Hopefully we answered some questions about the EFMP program. And again, stay tuned. I mean, we're going to bring conversations just like this one to you every single week. Be sure to RSVP to the event. We've got it kind of all cataloged over on our Facebook page so you can keep track of what time we'll go live. But it will be every Wednesday we're booked all the way through February into March now. So we have tons of great content coming your way, and looking forward to helping bring some calm to the chaos. All right, everybody, we'll see you next week. Bye.